he laughed. A cruel, triumphant sound that echoed down the phone line. But before he made that call, he had stood right in front of me. He had taken the beautiful diamond ring, the symbol of our perfect love, and thrown it against the wall. It shattered into a million tiny, glittering pieces that scattered across the polished concrete floor like frozen tears. And then he walked out. The phone call came a moment later, his voice filled with venomous glee. "You're not my wife anymore," he sneered. "And that bakery you love so much, it's not yours either." The words were a physical blow, yet I didn't flinch. I felt the hot sting of betrayal, the humiliation of being so utterly fooled, but a quiet, icy resolve began to harden in my core. He thought he had won. He thought he had left me with nothing but shattered glass and broken dreams. But in that single, devastating moment, I knew his arrogance was a weakness I could exploit. His victory lap was about to become his first step toward a catastrophic fall, and I would be the one to make sure of it. My name is Sarah, and until that brutal phone call, I genuinely believed my life was a perfect picture, painted with the sweetest colors. My entire world revolved around my bakery, a cozy little haven nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street in the city. The air, there was a constant, comforting mix of cinnamon, warm bread, and melted chocolate. It wasn't just a business. It was the physical embodiment of my lifelong dream. Every morning, I would wake up with a sense of purpose, my hands eager to knead the dough, my heart full of joy at the thought of bringing a smile to a customer's face with a simple pastry dot. My husband Lucas was the other half of that picture. He was a sharp, charismatic financial manager who handled all the boring but necessary aspects of the business. He was the spreadsheets and the numbers, while I was the flour and the sugar. He'd often say, "You just focus on making the magic, I'll handle the money." I trusted him completely. We were a team, a perfect synergy of creativity and logic. He was always impeccably dressed in his tailored suits, exuding an air of confidence that I found both reassuring and attractive. He would come home, put his arm around me as I decorated a cake, and tell me how proud he was of me, how we were building an empire together. But looking back, the subtle cracks were already there, and I was just too in love, too trusting, to see them for what they were. Lucas's late nights at the office became more frequent. When I asked about them, he'd dismiss it with a charming smile and a quick kiss, saying he was securing our future. He began to handle all the financial statements personally, always brushing off my questions about our revenue and expenses with vague assurances that everything was on track. He'd say things like, "Don't you worry your pretty head about it, Sarah, that's my job." I mistook his condescending protectiveness for love and his secrecy for professional necessity. He manipulated my passion for baking, my naivety about finances, and my deep trust in him to build a foundation of lies. He made me feel secure and cherished, all while slowly, methodically, he was severing the very roots of my financial independence and preparing to pull the rug out from under me. I was living in a beautiful cage, and I didn't even realize it was built from my own hard work and dreams. The cracks in our seemingly perfect life started subtly, like tiny fissures in the delicate icing of a wedding cake. I, a baker by trade and nature, was an expert at noticing details, but I was also an expert at smoothing them over with a layer of sweet optimism. It began with the numbers. My baker's intuition, honed over years of perfecting recipes and managing inventory, told me something was deeply wrong. My specialty ingredients, the single origin chocolate, the imported Madagascar vanilla beans were costing more, yet our monthly profit margins were inexplicably shrinking. My business was thriving. The customer base was growing. The math simply didn't add up. When I tentatively brought my concerns to Lucas, he would dismiss them with an effortless charm that I had, until then, found so endearing. "It's just market volatility, Sarah, global supply chain issues," he'd say, never once making eye contact. "I'm handling it. I've made some shrewd investments to counter the losses. You just keep baking your wonderful cakes, honey. That's all you need to worry about." He positioned himself as my knight in shining armor, shielding me from the ugly realities of business, and I, foolishly, let him. I trusted him with my dreams, my passion, and my livelihood, but the unease festered. It was a cold, quiet dread that no amount of sugar and butter could soothe. I began to notice other, more personal inconsistencies, a subtle, unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes, hurried phone calls he took in the other room, and late nights always excused by major deals and important clients. I brushed it all away, telling myself it was a sign of his growing success, a testament to the future he was building for us. The truth, as I would soon discover, was far more sinister. The moment the perfect facade crumbled came on a Tuesday afternoon. Lucas had been in a rush, leaving his laptop open on the small desk in our shared office at the back of the bakery. A single, glaring email was open on the screen, a notification from our bank that he had forgotten to close. The subject line read, "Loan finalization and property transfer." My heart dropped into my stomach like a lead weight. My hands, still covered in flour from the day's baking, trembled as I began to read. The document detailed a massive business loan, taken out in both of our names, a fact that made my blood run cold. But the collateral wasn't a generic asset. It was the bakery itself, listed as the primary guarantee. He had taken out a loan worth a fortune, using the one thing that was unequivocally mine, without a single word of consultation. The betrayal was a physical blow, a sharp, icy ache in my chest. Yet, the knife twisted even deeper. Further down the document, my eyes caught a name that wasn't mine. It was a woman's name, listed as a cosigner on a private bank account that had just received a significant portion of the loan funds. The money he had borrowed against my life's work was being used to fund a life with someone else. Thought in that horrifying moment. Every lie, every vague answer, every secretive phone call clicked into place with a sickening finality. The market volatility was a lie. The shrewd investments were lavish gifts and trips for this other woman. The business success he spoke of was simply his clever scheme to drain my life's work and use it to build a new life for himself. He hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had orchestrated a complete and systematic theft of my identity and my passion. I was still staring at the screen, my mind reeling, when his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was him. He was calling from a city halfway across the country, a place he'd told me he was at for a major conference. My voice, to my own surprise, was calm and steady as I answered. "I'm divorcing you," he announced without preamble, his voice filled with a sickening, triumphant glee. "I've already finalized the sale of the bakery. You'll need to figure out where you're going to live and what you're going to do. Enjoy that." He was reveling in my imagined devastation. He thought he had left me with nothing but a worthless dream and a mountain of debt. He believed he had stripped me of my home, my business, and my dignity. But as I stood there, surrounded by the sweet scent of freshly baked bread and the bitter reality of my new life, I realized he had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated me. He had forgotten that a baker is not just someone who mixes flour and sugar. She is someone who understands chemistry, who works with incredible precision, and who knows how to create something beautiful and powerful from the most unassuming ingredients. I may have been broken, but I was not defeated, and I was about to show him that the most powerful thing I could ever bake was his undoing. The final paperwork for our business license, the one that explicitly stated my sole ownership, was a minor detail that he overlooked. He was so consumed by his arrogance and so confident in my complete trust that he never bothered to read the fine print. He simply saw my name and assumed he could manipulate me into signing over my rights whenever he pleased. That oversight, born from his pride, would ultimately become his undoing. He expected me to crumble. He fully anticipated that I would call him back, begging and pleading, a desperate, broken woman. He saw me as a naive, helpless baker, about to be cast out into the world with nothing but shattered dreams and a pile of debt. But in that moment, as the phone went dead, a new strength, cold and resolute, solidified within me. The gut-wrenching pain was there, a dull ache that seemed to radiate from the very core of my being, but it was overshadowed by a quiet, focused fury. I was a victim, yes, but I refused to be a passive one. He had made his first mistake by underestimating me, and I would ensure it was his last. My first call wasn't to a friend for comfort, but to a woman named Rachel, a sharp, nonsense corporate lawyer who had been a loyal customer for years. Rachel was a quiet woman, with an almost intimidating intellect and a reputation for being a formidable opponent in the courtroom. I laid out the entire story for her, my voice calm and steady, detailing every discrepancy in the finances, every secretive phone call, every vague answer. My emotional state was a strange mix of profound grief and clinical detachment. I spoke as if I were a third-party observer, recounting a tragic story about someone else. This distance allowed me to process the facts without being consumed by the raw emotion. He thinks he has the bakery, I told her, my voice a whisper. He thinks he's already sold it and that I'm out, but he made a mistake, Rachel. A big one. Rachel's eyes, usually cool and analytical, now held a spark of fire. He made more than one mistake, Sarah, she said, her voice like a steel blade. He committed fraud, and we're going to use that against him. The word fraud felt like a jolt of electricity. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice. It gave me a new purpose, a new direction. The plan was simple, but precise. I had to gather every piece of evidence I could find, meticulously and without his knowledge. I became a silent hunter, a ghost in my own life. While he was off celebrating his supposed victory, I was quietly building his undoing. I started by meticulously going through every single piece of paperwork I had ever signed. As Lucas's wife and the official owner of the bakery, I had signed hundreds of documents over the years, but Rachel had taught me something crucial. The fine print matters. I found a clause he had buried deep in a partnership agreement that stipulated while he handled financial management, I was the sole legal owner of the bakery's business license and physical assets. He had control of the purse strings, but the title deed was undeniably mine. He had been so arrogant, so confident in his ability to manipulate me, that he had overlooked this one crucial detail. His own carelessness was my weapon. My emotional journey during this time was a tumultuous one. During the day, I would put on a brave face, serving customers with a serene smile, my hands expertly shaping dough. But in the quiet hours of the night, alone in the office, the grief would threaten to overwhelm me. I would stare at the documents, at his forged signature, at the damning emails, and a wave of nausea would wash over me. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was reliving the betrayal over and over again. Every piece of paper was a fresh wound, a reminder of how deeply I had been deceived. The anger I felt was a cold, simmering rage that I had to contain, to channel into a productive force. I would not allow it to consume me. It was a fuel, not a fire. I began my covert mission, documenting everything. I took high-resolution photos of the loan documents on his laptop screen before he deleted them. I scoured my own email archives and found old threads where he had discussed a major new venture with his mistress, outlining his plan to cut out the dead weight and use the bakery's assets to fund their new life. I even found a draft email, unsent, where he had forged my signature on a document to transfer the business title, a clear, damning piece of evidence. I gathered every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of circumstantial evidence that proved his malicious intent. Every quiet moment was spent in the office, surrounded by stacks of papers and a sense of cold, unwavering determination. My silence was my greatest tool. When he would call to check on me, expecting me to be sobbing and distraught, I would answer, with a calm, clipped tone, "I'm fine," I would say. "I'm just getting my things together." He interpreted this as my surrender, my acceptance of defeat. He never suspected that I was not packing my bags, but gathering the ammunition for a war he had already lost. I let him believe he had won. I let his arrogance grow, nourishing it with my feigned weakness. Every day I spent serving customers with a serene smile was a performance, an act of silent revenge that was building towards an explosive climax. He thought he was free, but in reality, he was walking directly into a trap that he himself had built. I was no longer a naive baker. I was a strategist, a meticulous collector of facts, a quiet storm preparing to unleash its full force. The emotional pain was the very thing that made me strong. It was a constant reminder of what I had to fight for. I would not let his betrayal be the end of my story. It was only the beginning of a new, much more powerful one. The day of reckoning arrived not with a bang, but with the chilling, devastating efficiency of the legal system. Lucas, still basking in the glow of his supposed victory, decided to make a dramatic appearance at the bakery. He wasn't alone. He brought her with him, his mistress, Nicole, a woman with a sleek haircut and a smug expression that mirrored his own. They walked in like they owned the place, her arm possessively looped through his, her eyes sweeping over the space I had poured my soul into with a look of pure condescension. "So this is it?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's a little small, don't you think?" Lucas laughed, a cruel, triumphant sound, and squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, Nicole," he said, loud enough for me to hear. "We'll sell this dump and get something much bigger. Something that actually matches our lifestyle." I stood there, flour dusting my apron and my hands, and watched them. My heart, once a chaotic mess of pain and rage, was now a cold, steady drum. I saw the arrogance on Lucas's face, the unshakable belief that he had won. I looked at the man I had loved and trusted, and all I saw was a cruel stranger who had stolen my life. I walked over to the desk, picked up a sealed manila envelope, and handed it to him. "This," I said, my voice, steady and low, "is for you." He looked at me, a flash of genuine confusion in his eyes, before his smug expression returned. "What is this, Sarah?" "A final apology," he scoffed. He tore open the envelope, his eyes scanning the formal letter inside. As he read, the color drained from his face, replaced by a sickly pallor. The laughter died on his lips, leaving a gaping, silent hole. It was a cease and desist letter from Rachel, informing him that his actions constituted criminal fraud and that a lawsuit had been filed against him. It laid out in no uncertain terms that he could not, and had never been able to, sell the bakery. The document was a precise, legal dismantling of his entire scheme. Nicole looked on, confused. "What is it, Lucas?" she asked, her voice edged with anxiety. "What's going on?" Lucas looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice trembling. "You can't do this. This is ridiculous." "I can," I said simply, my voice now full of a quiet power I never knew I had. And I did. The days that followed were a relentless blur of legal maneuvering and strategic takedowns. Rachel, true to her word, was a force of nature. She filed an injunction against the sale of the bakery, contacted the potential buyer, and presented them with our evidence of fraud. The buyer, realizing they were about to become entangled in a legal nightmare, immediately pulled out of the deal. They were furious, not with me, but with Lucas, for his blatant deception. His carefully constructed house of cards was beginning to collapse, but the real turning points, the ones that sealed his fate, were yet to come. In a final, desperate attempt to regain control, Lucas made a move he was certain would succeed. He called his mother, a formidable matriarch and a powerful figure in the city's social and business circles. He painted me as a vengeful, hysterical wife, driven by jealousy, trying to ruin her beloved son's career. His mother called me, her voice a chilling, authoritative command. "You need to know your place, Sarah. Lucas is my son, and his career is far more important than your childish emotions." She demanded that I drop the lawsuit and offered to compensate me with a small sum of money, a pittance to buy my silence. But she didn't know that my quiet information gathering had extended beyond Lucas's fraud. While digging through the bank statements, I had uncovered a hidden detail. Lucas had used our joint account to pay off significant gambling debts for a friend of hers, a man who was also a key figure in her business. I had also found damning evidence of Lucas using her name and influence to secure shady deals, all while siphoning off a percentage for himself. I had already prepared for this. I sent her a meticulously compiled email containing irrefutable proof of Lucas's just to me, but to her. The email outlined how he had manipulated her influence and secretly paid off debts with money that was meant for our business, and now, for the new life he was building with Nicole. I also included a polite but firm warning. If she continued to interfere, this information would be made public, threatening not only Lucas's reputation but also her own. The phone went silent after that. I never heard from his mother again. His final, desperate lifeline had been cut, not by me, but by his own deceit. The final and most brutal counterstrike didn't come from the courtroom or Lucas's mother, but from the woman he had chosen. The climax of this bitter war took place during a key hearing. Lucas's high-priced lawyer, in a last-ditch effort, tried to portray me as an incompetent partner who willingly handed over control of the business. But Rachel was prepared. She methodically presented the evidence I had collected, the falsified documents, the unsent emails, and the legal clause in our original partnership agreement that proved he had no right to sell the business assets. He had been so sure I was too ignorant to understand the fine print. But it was that very fine print that was now destroying him. Then came the final blow. A revelation that Rachel had kept hidden until the perfect moment. She presented the court with a series of medical bills. These weren't just any bills. They were from a fertility clinic under Lucas's name. They detailed his private fertility tests and the doctor's grim conclusion: he was infertile. This was a truth he had hidden from me for years, a fact he had always blamed on my reluctance to have children. But the twist came from another piece of evidence. Rachel then presented a series of text messages and emails between Lucas and Nicole. The messages were filled with Lucas's grand promises of a future family, of a beautiful life with the children they would have. The truth was now laid bare for everyone to see. He hadn't just been a fraudster, he had been a liar of the most profound kind, building a future on a lie he knew he could never fulfill. Lucas, with a pale, ashen face, stared at Nicole, who sat beside him. Her expression, once arrogant, was now a mask of utter horror and disgust. She realized that everything he had told her, the promises of a family, the dreams of a future, was a complete and utter lie. The life he had so callously built with her was crumbling before her eyes. She hadn't signed up for a life with a disgraced, broke fraudster, much less one who had built their entire relationship on a cruel and fundamental deception. The judge, after reviewing all the evidence, delivered a swift and decisive verdict. Lucas was found guilty of fraud and embezzlement. The sale of the bakery was nullified, and he was ordered to return the full amount of the loan money he had taken and pay for all legal fees. His business partners, hearing of the scandal and facing potential lawsuits of their own, immediately cut all ties with him. He was blacklisted, his career over. As the gavel came down, I looked at Lucas across the courtroom. The arrogance, the smug triumph, was gone. All that was left was a man with a pale, defeated face. Beside him, Nicole, his mistress, stood up and walked out of the courtroom, leaving him completely alone. My revenge wasn't loud or chaotic. It was quiet, strategic, and surgical. It was a victory won, not with emotional pleas, but with paperwork, evidence, and the cold, unyielding hand of the law. The courtroom doors closed behind me, sealing a painful, tumultuous chapter of my life. I walked out a free woman, the bakery once again legally and indisputably mine. But the victory felt bittersweet, a hollow echo of the joy I thought I would feel. It wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity, and my peace of mind. The process of healing began not with a grand celebration, but with a quiet, symbolic act. I spent the next few days in the bakery, not baking, but scrubbing away every trace of his influence. I repainted the walls a bright, cheerful yellow, a color he had always deemed too childish, replacing the stark, minimalist aesthetic he had insisted on. I swapped out the dark, modern furniture with light, cozy pieces that felt more like me. Every action was a deliberate rejection of his control and a reclamation of my own space. I was physically and emotionally cleansing the bakery, turning a place that had been tainted by his lies into a sanctuary of my own making. My emotional journey during this period was a complex and messy one. I was no longer a victim, but I wasn't entirely whole yet. I would find myself staring at a flour-dusted countertop, suddenly remembering a lie he had told, and a wave of nausea would wash over me. The betrayal was like a ghost, a presence that lingered in the corners of my mind. But instead of letting it haunt me, I decided to confront it. I sat down and wrote a detailed list of every single thing he had done to me, every lie, every manipulation, every piece of evidence I had collected. It was a painful, exhaustive process, but by the end of it, the ghost had lost its power. It was no longer a shadowy memory, but a documented reality, something I could look at and say, "This happened, and I survived it." I renamed the bakery Empowered Sweets, a name that encapsulated everything I had been through and everything I was determined to become. It was no longer just a place to make cakes. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to what a woman could achieve on her own. My story, once a source of personal humiliation, became a powerful narrative of strength and survival. Word spread, and my bakery became more than just a local business. It became a hub for other women seeking inspiration. I started hosting baking workshops specifically for women who had also faced betrayal or were struggling to find their footing after a difficult life event. I taught them how to knead dough and decorate cakes, but more importantly, I taught them that they had the power to create a new, beautiful life, even from the most bitter ingredients. I told them my story, not with bitterness, but with a sense of quiet triumph. I wanted them to know that it was okay to be angry, but that the real power lay in channeling that anger into a force for creation, not destruction. Lucas tried to reach out. His messages, at first, were a pathetic mix of apologies and pleas. "I made a mistake, Sarah," one read. "I miss our life. Can we talk?" His tone then shifted to one of desperation and veiled threats. "You're going to ruin me, Sarah. Is that what you want?" I never replied. His words, once so powerful and manipulative, now held no weight. For years, he had made me feel like I was the source of his happiness, the reason for his success. Now, I saw with startling clarity that his happiness and success had never been tied to me. They were tied to his control over me. And now that I had broken free, he was floundering. My silence was a quiet, firm boundary that he couldn't cross. I had finally learned that my energy was a precious resource, and I would no longer waste it on trying to fix a man who was broken beyond repair. My friends and family rallied around me, a support system I hadn't realized I needed until I had it. My old friend Lauren came by and helped me rearrange the bakery, box up all of Lucas's things, and celebrate my newfound freedom. "He doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or your time," she said. Her words a much-needed balm for my soul. For so long, I had carried the burden of my marriage alone, feeling isolated and misunderstood. But now, I had people in my corner, people who saw my strength and championed my right to be happy. They were a reminder that I was not alone, and that true partnership wasn't about control, but about unconditional support. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a thriving business owner, a teacher, a friend. My life was no longer a beautiful facade. It was a real, tangible thing, a work in progress that was all my own. I had taken back not just the bakery, but my life, my voice, and my sense of self. The betrayal had been a poison, but the aftermath was the most powerful antidote I could have ever asked for. I kept the broken pieces of that diamond ring in a small, glass-framed box on my office desk. It's no longer a painful reminder of what I lost, but a powerful testament to what I gained. It reminds me that sometimes the most beautiful things can emerge from shattered pieces, that a broken promise can be the catalyst for an unbreakable strength. My journey taught me a profound lesson. A woman's true worth is not defined by the ring on her finger or the man beside her. It's defined by her resilience, her courage, and her ability to stand on her own 2 feet, even when the ground beneath her has crumbled. This bakery is more than just a business. It is a legacy. It is a living, breathing testament to every woman who has ever been told she couldn't, who has been underestimated, or who has faced betrayal. The scent of cinnamon and sugar that fills this space is now intertwined with the aroma of hope and self. Every cake I bake, every workshop I teach, is a step forward, a silent act of defiance against the past that tried to destroy me. My revenge wasn't loud or chaotic. It was quiet, strategic, and profoundly sweet. It was the success of my business, the joy in my heart, and the freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim. I hope my story inspires other women to listen to their intuition, to protect their own interests, and to understand that their worth is not defined by anyone but themselves. Financial independence is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the armor that protects you, the foundation that supports you, and the wings that allow you to fly. Trust yourself, trust your gut, and never, ever sign a document you haven't read. You are the author of your own story, and you have the power to rewrite it whenever you choose. The betrayal was just a chapter, but this new life I've built is the entire book. It is a story of a woman who was broken, but who chose to bake her way back to being whole. Have you ever turned a moment of betrayal into your greatest strength? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can celebrate our resilience and empower each other.